This is the Scottish Rugby Podcast.
The Scottish Rugby Podcast.
With Stuart Cameron and Dale Clancy.
Hello and welcome to the second Scottish Club Rugby Podcast. I'm Stuart Cameron, and this season got underway at the weekend with 25 matches played across the 5 divisions, and Dale Clancy and I will be looking at the results and also looking ahead to this Saturday's second round of games, and also hearing from some of the clubs along the way. Well, as usual, a few shocks and surprises at the weekend, but Scottish Premiership champions Hawick got off to a winning start at home to Glasgow Hawks, winning 27-12.
We knew that Hawick were still going to be strong, especially at home. They've, in the seasons past, they've had a little bit of early season jitters, but you know that was a quite accomplished performance. You know, it was always comfortable against a Hawks team which has seen a lot of changes. We did say, you know, in last week's podcast that Glasgow Hawks are probably one of the teams in the Premiership that have had a lot of changes to their squad, mainly due to, you know, location and success of some of their players that have been coming through. So, you know, it's a good start to the season for Hawick, and a bit of controversy as well with Jay Linton to try getting chalked off. But, you know, overall it was a solid performance.
Well, no bonus point for Hawick, but head coach Matty Douglas wasn't too bothered at this stage of the season, although as we saw last season in other divisions, notably National League 2, results can come back to haunt you after the 18 games have been played. I mean, that was quite a finish in National 2 last year. Yeah,
you know, that's the beauty of the leagues. You know, that you never quite know how the teams are going to line up at the start of the season, but, you know, come the end, it's sometimes these results can be the difference between promotion and relegation. But I think we know in the Premiership that's not the case, because you know, the bonus points might be the difference between getting a home playoff, or, you know, especially in Hawick's case, you know, it might be the difference between getting their home playoff semi-final or perhaps being away from home. But, you know, some interesting results in the Premiership overall, as was the other national leagues as well. But I think the Premiership did throw up a few surprises.
Well, Edinburgh Accies won away from home against Jedforest, 41-17. Curry also came to the borders, went back with 5 points with a 47-17 victory at Selkirk. But that one was pretty close at 19-12, quite late into the game. It was the final 20 minutes or so when Curry ran away with it. But any game where you can collect 5 points on the road is job done as far as they're concerned.
Yeah, I think probably looking at those two results were results that I could have expected, you know, for the visiting team to go away with a bonus point victory, obviously both getting in the 40s as well. But yeah, with regards to Selkirk, I think they've suffered with a little bit of lack of depth in their squad, particularly the front row, having to move a few players around, and it's difficult against a team like Curry. You know, they've got a really, really strong squad, but, you know, their forward pack's really attritional. So, you know, if you're going to try and play players in the pack for pretty much predominantly 80 minutes, you're going to come up unstuck at some point. And I think, Selkirk certainly found that at Philippock, was the fact that they'd given a lot to the opening 60 minutes of the game. It was a matter of hanging in for the last 20, the last quarter, and just weren't able to, when Curry were able to pull away.
Well, a ding-dong battle at Stony Hill, Musselburgh racing to a 12-0 lead against newcomers Kelso quite early on. Then Kelso coming back to get a try bonus and build up a good lead. And then the never-say-die attitude from Musselburgh, which we saw last season. It kicked in and they bounced back for a 31-31 draw.
Heriots and Musselburgh kind of spoilt my coupon last week with my predictions, because I did say that Kelso would get a narrow away victory, and it's obviously a draw, and I said that Marr would get the win at Goldenacre, which was something that they weren't able to achieve. You know, that's a great start, I think, to the season for Kelso. That will give them a lot of confidence, as well as Musselburgh. You know, Musselburgh had a difficult season last year, and they're being able to show that they can score points. You know, they're scoring a lot of points against the new boys in the division. 31 all. It's probably a good start. They get some points on the board, you know, and they're able to then look to try and build on that for the rest of the campaign. But, you know, I think Kelso will be the happier of the two parties there.
And the other game that you mentioned there at Goldenacre, another tight affair, Heriots Blues snatching the win just at the end from Marr.
Yeah, Marr have brought a lot of players back into the fold, and, you know, welcome some new signings, and, you know, Heriots are looking to keep building and build the foundations that they perhaps lost when the Super Series and the Super 6 came about. It's about home form in the Premiership. If you can win your home games, you're going to make sure that you're there or thereabouts come the end of the season, or come the turn anyway. You know, you can start looking towards, how do we build for the rest of the season? You know, if you're winning your home games, there's a chance you can push towards the playoffs. If you're not winning your home games, it's going to be difficult to obviously pick up points on the road in the Prem. So you could be in a battle for, you know, relegation. So great start for Heriots, and Marr will be disappointed that they couldn't cling on to that win and get over the line.
Well, let's park last week and take a look at Saturday's Premiership fixtures, starting with Curry against Jedforest at Millennium Park, and we can hear now from Jed captain Clark Skeldon.
We know we were good in spells last week, but we also know we'll have to be much improved this week to take Annan back down the road with us. There's a welcome return for Gary Monroe, Lewis Walker and Aidan Bambrick in the backs and Ben Howe in the forwards. And with no one picking up any notable knocks last weekend, it gives us a bit of competition for places this week. We do have the luxury of going up there with not a lot of expectation on us, so we can go up there with no pressure and enjoy our rugby and hopefully put in a performance that warrants some points at the end of it.
Clark Skeldon, and it's not been a happy hunting ground for Jed in the past. A trip to Millennium Park, always a difficult prospect.
Yeah, it's difficult for all the teams to go to Millennium, and I think off the back of Curry's performance at Philippock last week, they'll be, in positive mood, in Edinburgh, and I think that the pitch will be dry for a change, which will be nice, but it'll be a place where they'll be wanting to put in a performance and really put down a marker, because these early stages in the season, we don't really know who the favourites are going to be until maybe 6-7 games in. So the teams will be wanting to try and build that confidence and do what Hawick did last year. They were able to keep that momentum going, and Curry will be looking to do the same, because they certainly have a lot to try and make, take out on the other sides that have stopped them winning championships over the last couple of seasons. So that's going to be a tough ask for Jed to pick up any points at Millennium.
Inbrackies, they play at Rayburn Place for the first time this season against Musselburgh. They always classify this as a derby, with the two clubs less than 8 miles away. It was a 28-5 win last season in the corresponding fixture for Ackies, and Ackies will certainly start as favourites there.
Yeah, I think so. Again, they've Ackies a good win at Riverside Park last weekend, and they'll be playing a Musselburgh team in a somewhat Edinburgh derby. Both teams will be wanting to try and look more towards the top of the table, but Edinburgh Ackies looked really, really impressive in their game against Jedforest. I think they've got a good squad, good depth in their squad as well. Musselburgh, obviously with a draw, a difficult game against Kelso, because it's hard to gauge where Musselburgh are because of Kelso being the new team in the division. But yeah, totally agree with you there, Stuart. I think Edinburgh Ackies will start that one as favourites.
Well, from two teams unbeaten after round one to two teams who have yet to score any points from their first games. That's Glasgow Hawks, who face Selkirk at Ballgrey. We're going to hear from Hawks coach Andy Hill, but first Selkirk's boss this season, who is Gordon Henderson.
We've been talking as a squad about the positives from last Saturday's game, and at the same time being open and honest about our individual performances and some of the fixes we need to make looking into this week. That's going to be a tough shift going through to Glasgow. Hawks done pretty well against Hawick, especially in the last 20 of the game. So we're excited about this week. We're working hard last night at training, again tomorrow night. We're looking, to go through Glasgow with confidence, and just in terms of our own performance, and just if these fixes are corrected, then we've got to we've got to hopefully come away with points. This week we've got Finlay Whelans and Ben Pickles available for selection, so there's boys coming back now, so we'll have a bit of strength and depth as well in certain areas. So we're looking forward to working really hard. And let's get on the road to Glasgow and hopefully come back with some points.
This week we obviously welcome Selkirk to Ballgrey, and we're excited to get our home season off to a start. Games against Selkirk have historically been very close, contested affairs, ones in which we've been in front quite a lot of the time and then managed to lose it towards the end. So that's been a real focus. Having reviewed the footage from Hawick last week, we felt as if while we were kind of well beaten by Hawick, and maybe the scoreline didn't really reflect that, we managed to hang in there, which was real grit and determination from the boys. So this week's been about a few key fixes to try and make sure that we can solve a couple of things in attack and also solve a couple of things in defence in terms of trying to slow down ball. So that's what our focus has been on this week, and we look forward to welcoming Selkirk up to Ballgrey on Saturday.
Two coaches from Hawks and Selkirk there, Andy Hill and Gordon Henderson before him. Again, you have to go with home advantage for Hawks, but remember last season Selkirk had that remarkable run, winning 7 of their 9 away games, including a 29-19 win against Glasgow Hawks at Ballgrey.
I think out of all those fixtures, that's probably the most intriguing one in the Premiership this weekend. I think you can look at all the other ones and perhaps pick out a favourite or who you think will win. That's a difficult one because of the change in personnel for Hawks. I think they know, you can hear there that they're a team in transition. They're building. They're looking to, try and really integrate these new players and new faces into the Glasgow Hawks team. Selkirk, on the other hand, have still got a lot of players who are familiar faces round about the club. McClymont now leading as captain, Aaron McComb as well. They're more experienced players, but the likes, as we said last week, Cam Eason putting a good performance at the weekend. they're familiar faces in Selkirk because they're a small town. So the players have come through the same conveyor belt. Selkirk's form last season goes out the window. It doesn't really matter about it. They have to pick up points. But because of these two teams, because they're probably the most unpredictable out of everybody so far, you can't gauge too much into their opening weekend. I think that's the pick of the games. I think that's the most intriguing one. And
Selkirk have got Whelans and Peebles back, as we just heard.
Yeah, I think especially the introduction back of Peebles. He's obviously was at Selkirk, had a little bit of time with the Knights, maybe never got as many game times, a bit of injuries as well. Back to Selkirk, he's going to be a big asset. Like to Grant Sooty in there as well. He's a phenomenal player, and they've been calling on Josh Beveridge from Boroughmuir last weekend as well, the young scrum half coming off the bench. So they've got personnel there that they're looking to try and build round, but. It's still a difficult game. You need to get in the right frame of mind to go to Glasgow and get into the right mood to take on a Glasgow Hawks side who will certainly be wanting to try and gel quickly to make sure that their season's not going to become a bit of a bogey, because I don't see them being a team they're going to be relegated. I certainly see them as a team that would be competing for top 4, but they need to find that cohesion pretty quickly.
Well, by the way, you can get in touch with us at podcast@bordersrugby.net and share your thoughts about anything to do with club rugby in Scotland. So if you've got anything to say, we'd love to hear from you. The email again, podcast@bordersrugby.net. Well, moving on to the next match on the list, and one of the games featured on Borders Rugby TV this weekend, that's Kelso versus Heriot's Blues. Two teams looking to continue their unbeaten season. Kelso will have a big home support for sure for their first Premiership home match for over 20 years, while Heriot's Blues are coming off the back of a win at home to Marr, as we mentioned earlier. Let's hear from Kelso Director of Rugby, Neil Hinnigan.
We welcome Heriots to Poynter Park this Saturday for our first Premiership game at home. Hoping for a big crowd, I'm sure there will be. Last week 31-all up at Musselburgh, not the worst result. One we felt we probably should have won, but yeah, we could have lost it as well. So 3 good points on the road and looking to build on that. Main objective this week is to be better in defence, more width in defence. Last week got caught out with a little bit of the speed of the game and some of the width that Musselburgh played with, and I think that's just an idea of what's in this league and the step up. Obviously Heriots are a natural wide playing side under Phil Smith and Jim Parker. They like to throw the ball about, and they'll come down with the sunshine on their back and the hard firm wide pitch at Poynter. I'm sure they'll be looking to put some points on us, so that's probably the main focus, and then hopefully the attack will take care of itself. Changes wise, we lost Archie Cowan, vice captain, last week to a broken hand, so he's out for around about 6-7 weeks, so it's a shame for Archie, but James Glendinning impressed for Kelso Sharks a couple of weeks ago, and then he did come off the bench at Musselburgh and impressed again, so he gets a start at 6. Liam Tate comes in on the bench and James Thompson comes in on the bench after recovering from injury. Keith Melbourne and Greg Ponton are still on holiday. We should welcome them back next week, depending on how training go and how Saturday's results go. One we're looking forward to, and we can't wait to get our first Premiership game at home this season.
That's too close to call, really, that one. Kelso against Heriot's Blues.
Yeah, Heriot's a great result in the opening weekend against Marr. They had a difficult year last year, but have been able to retain most of the squad, and their Super Series team's going well. So in terms of the club and the training competition that they'll be able to get, it drags that level up slightly. So I think Heriots are doing things right at Golden Acre, but Kelso will be champing at the bit to play Premiership rugby at Poynter Park. As you say, it's been over 2 decades since they played Premiership rugby there. We've been lucky enough to be involved in some border derbies down at Poynter Park. There was one in particular, it was Kelso Melrose a couple of seasons ago. I think it was in the Border League, but it was a Kelso win right at the death, and you just seen it was one of the biggest crowds I'd seen in club rugby for a while in terms of just a general league game, and it was a brilliant atmosphere. And I hope that this weekend it's a similar attendance at Poynter Park, because that's what this club rugby game needs. It needs well backed local teams, big vocal support, well sponsored, well backed to support the good rugby that's going to be on display.
Well, the final game in the Premiership on Saturday, the 9th of September, is mouth-watering to say the least. It's Marr versus Hawick at Fullerton Park. There's been some close encounters in recent times between the two clubs, particularly at Troon, and on a couple of occasions Hawick took early leads and then Marr fought back to win the match. We're going to hear from both coaches shortly. Matty Douglas, but with a Marr perspective, here's head coach Kenny Diffenthal.
Looking forward to the weekend. Boys have prepped really well so far. few work-ons from last weekend. Disappointment obviously hit hard. First game of the season, so we need to try and fix those wrongs first, and then move into what we know will be a monumental task against a Hawick team that seemed to have started where they left off last season. One more night of prep, and then head into that game under no illusions. The task ahead of us. I'm sure it'll be a good contest. Hopefully lots of people with Fullerton. So we look forward to it. It's going to be a tough one.
It was great to get a win last weekend, opening day. Always good to start the campaign with a win and get points on the table. And look, I thought we played really well for 60-65 minutes. I think the last kind of 15 we probably did fall off a little bit. Hawks scoring 2 late tries, and look, that probably comes down to a little bit of switching off and a little bit of playing too much rugby in the middle of the park in the second half. I thought we probably could have played more in Hawks 22, and probably took its toll in the last 10 minutes, the amount of work that we done. So look, on the whole, really positive. I know Graham and Lewis were pleased with a lot of players' individual performances, and look, we've had there's a few more players who are back from injury this week that may feature at the weekend, so we're always bolstering the squad, and it's the competition that keeps driving these players. Competition for places is key, and that's what keeps these players focused. And look, we know how tough a challenge this will be heading to Marr this weekend. It's a tough place to go, Fullerton. We won there last year, but look, that doesn't even come into it. We know individually we're going to have to be there and switched on, and if we get it right collectively, then look, we are a hard team to beat, and that's a mentality that we need to install into the players this season, is that target's on our back. I've heard that a few times the last few weeks about how everybody's chasing us and we've got the target on our back. But look, that's a massive driver for me. It's a massive driver for this squad that we need to keep getting better, and we cannot switch off week to week. And if we continue to keep progressing and keep working hard, then we'll make it tough for teams to try and beat us. And that's the kind of mentality we've got within the squad. We're not a squad that is bullish and that just thinks we need to turn up. We work really hard, and look, at if the target's on our back, then so be it. We'll embrace the challenges. So look, Marr is a tough place to win, and if we defensively, if we're there and we can get a set piece platform, then look, we'll be looking to try and get a big result. But Marr will be tough side to beat, and they certainly won't roll over after. They'll be looking to get back to winning ways this weekend. So yeah, look, it's another big game for us. We go on a tough run, Marr, Kelso, Accies and Curry. So look, we'll be wanting to pick up as many points as we can in the next couple of weeks, and we're certainly looking forward to taking the trip to Truden on Saturday.
Matty Douglas, and before that Kenny Diffenthal. Now, if Hawick are going to be beaten this season, you'd think it's going to come on the road at Melrose Park, Raeburn Place or Fullerton Park. Yeah,
you would tend to agree with that, because that's the teams that it's difficult to go to those grounds. I just think that there's potential for more difficult games as well. I think any team, if you're going to drop points, it's definitely going to be on the road. They've got places to go that are really, really difficult. Melrose, as you mentioned, going to Truden's always difficult. We've covered a few games there. Most notably the playoff semi-final last year, the year before when Marr went on to win, eventually going to Melrose and picking up that Premiership trophy. So whether Marr played well last week or not at Golden Acre, I don't think it matters when Marr are at home. I think they've got a really, really good squad, still got really good players. They're another team that have been, almost catalysts of their own downfall, because they've been really successful, so the players have then moved on. But they've still got so many experienced players in there, and I think Hawick will find it really, really challenging to go up there early in the season to really hit their straps. So that'll be a lot tighter than I think last week suggested.
Marr, of course, have lost the last 3 games against Hawick. There was 29-10 in the corresponding fixture last season at Fullerton Park. Also at Mansfield Park, which was a bit of a howking. In fact, I think there's about 40 points in that one. Big result for Hawick. And of course, the cup final at the National Stadium. I think this one, though, though, is going to be a lot closer.
Yeah, I think it is going to be tight. I think that Hawick obviously at home weren't able to pick up that bonus point. I don't think that'll play in the back of their minds. I think they'll go up there and be professional. They've got the experience and the calmness in that squad that they built last year. They were tested every week and they were able to come through every single challenge. But I think early in the season it's difficult. Players mostly are fresh, squads are mostly fresh. So I wouldn't be surprised if come 5 o'clock on Saturday if there was a narrow Marr victory. But also, on the other hand, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a very emphatic Hawick victory. It's just one of those fixtures that is too hard to call this early in the season.
Well, an early look at the Premiership table sees Edinburgh clubs, 3 of them, Curry, Heriots Blues and Emberackies, all with 5 points, but Curry at the top on points difference. Hawick next on 4, Kelso and Musselburgh both getting 3 points each in that 31-all draw. Then Marr on 2 thanks to their losing bonus and try-bonus points, and Glasgow Hawks, Jedforest and Selkirk without any points at the moment, but very, very early days. So let's move to National 1. And last week, 4 big victories. All 5 winning clubs scored try-bonuses, with Watsonians at the top with a 52 points difference against Gala in a game that ended 69-17. But Ayr, they were relentless as well, winning by 51 points in their 62-11 demolition of newly promoted Glasgow Ackies. Highland were impressive on the road at Dundee, 47-19, it ended in that one, and GHA beat Melrose by 42 points to 26. The only close game was at Old Annisland, with GHK snatching the win from Biggar by a single point. It ended 32-31 in a thrilling encounter.
Yeah, I think we spoke last week about potential teams in all the divisions that we perhaps fancy for promotion or are going to be in the hunt, and especially in the national leagues. I think that it's so volatile, the player movement at national kind of 1, 2, 3, 4. It's harder to predict where teams are. But that is a result which is really, really interesting, because Biggar, a narrow defeat, I think we fancy them to be there or thereabouts. For a start to a season, GHK getting a good home win under their belt. But as you say, there's some huge results in there. That's such a difficult game for Glasgow Ackies, just coming out in that to play Ayr, who are perhaps one of the favourites to go up this year. And you can see the gulf. Just in that scoreline, the difference and the gap that some of these teams have to try and close when you go up a division, and that's how difficult it is.
Well, Ayr have been so close the last couple of seasons, so them winning well at Millbrae is no big surprise. But Watsonians posting that huge win over Gala at Marside, as they did last season, of course. So a great start for Ayr and Watsonians.
Yeah, I think the Ayr result, you could perhaps. You can digest that, because you go, yes, I could anticipate that they were going to have a win, particularly a bonus point win. The margin of victory is obviously, it could be anything after that, but you're not surprised by that. The Watsonian result is a real marker or a curveball, if you will, because you're kind of thinking, right, what level are Watsonians going to be at? Because Gala were in a lot of conversations last week. They've got, we know them quite well in the Borders, because they've got a lot of good young talent coming through. Over the last few seasons, they've been towards the top end of the table. Watsonians have been towards the bottom end after the kind of the restructure and reshuffling of the leagues. They were the whipping boys for the first part of the season last year, so to have that sort of result is a remarkable turnaround. I know they did put heavy points on Gala, but they were on a downward spiral at that point. This is the start of the season. All the teams should be firing on all cylinders, and Watsonians have, they've put their hand up to say that they're going to be really difficult to beat in my side.
And this is the thing as well that we mentioned earlier. It's almost like the 4x400 metres relay, isn't it? The stagger doesn't unwind until 5 or 6 games in. Then we get a clearer picture of where things are happening. But also, Biggar had a fantastic pre-season. It doesn't always mean that you're going to have, on day one, a really good opening start to your campaign. So lots to decide yet.
Yeah, I think I'm probably going to make people switch off until maybe the 5th or 6th podcast that we do. But, it is difficult to get the real landscape of any league. It doesn't matter if it's football, rugby, hockey, whatever. It's really difficult to see where all these teams are until 5-6 games in, when you can start to compare and contrast fixtures. Pre-season doesn't mean anything. Pre-season is getting rugby into players' legs, making sure that they're as fresh as possible. Sometimes a little bit of self-preservation as well, to say, some of the experienced players, let's wrap them up a little bit, not give them as much exposure to pre-season because they've done it before. They need to come on and make an impact. But we're now off and running, and this is where you start to see the first little pieces of the jigsaw come about to games 6 or 7, as I say, 5, 6, 7, when you start looking at stuff going, right, the next fixture coming up is really intriguing. It might be Ayr versus GHA, and you go, they're both undefeated, they're both up there, this is going to be where, they start to separate each other a bit. But early doors, it's interesting in itself just to see the fixtures and see the results coming through.
And Highland prove that they can win on grass as well, on the road. But that's a good win for them at Dundee. 40 points, that'll give them a lot of confidence.
It's amazing. Sometimes teams go up and down in the league structures. Dundee are obviously used to be Dundee High School, former pupils, and then they've tried to restructure and reshape. And they lost Morgan Academy, I think they were another team in there. And
yeah, well, they've amalgamated effectively under Dundee Rugby now.
So yeah, Dundee Rugby, which makes sense. I think there's a lot of areas that perhaps could follow a similar trait. It's a good idea. Rugby in some areas is dwindling away, so it's nice to see a little bit of forward thinking in terms of trying to bank resources and make it more attractive. It will start to, I think, pay dividends in time. But in terms of Highland, we're not really talking about Dundee there, but Highland got off to a great start, and it'll be another thing with them. Is that a big result? Or Dundee, does that scoreline suggest Dundee are as poor as what Highland have made them out to look? As I say, 5-6 games in, we'll start to see where these teams are settling.
OK, let's have a look at the fixtures then, starting with Biggar against Ayr. And this is going to be absolutely huge. Biggar back at Hartree Mill, Ayr on the road for the first time this season. We caught up with Ayr head coach Grant Anderson.
This Saturday, we're looking forward to the fixture at Biggar. They'll pose a different challenge to what Glasgow Hawks posed, and I'm keen again to see how we react to that. I was pleased with elements of our performance last week. Since coming in, I've tried to change quite a lot of the kind of philosophy and systems that the team are using, and I'm looking to do that quite drastically. We're playing off a different system in both attack and D. So again, just building into that as the weeks come. Some boys put in really strong performances, some boys not so much, so there might be one or two changes within the squad moving forward this Saturday, and I'm really keen to see if boys can kind of step up to the plate and lay their hand on a jersey and make that jersey theirs moving forward. Biggar obviously lost to GHK in their first game, so they'll be really keen to get back to winning ways. I know it's their ladies' day as well, so potentially a little bit of a crowd, their first home game, so a good environment to test ourselves in. We're looking forward to it.
So thoughts on this one, Dale? This is going to be a big match.
Yeah, I think it is. It's going to be a really big game between two teams who will have real ambitions of getting promotion to the Premiership. They both have their own axes to grind in terms of missed out opportunities over the last few years, but Biggar will be wanting to really stamp home their home advantage. Could be the under 16s, for Ayr. They're a really well drilled outfit from top to bottom, from the semi-professional team right down to the kind of junior level. They'll be difficult to beat at home, for Biggar, but you just have to, you kind of almost sway with Biggar there because they're such a stubborn team at Hartree Mill. If they get their chance to really take control of games, especially up front, it's a difficult task for most sides. The only caveat to that is that Ayr also have a really attritional pack. They've got really experienced players still playing their ranks. It's going to be one of those difficult games. It's going to be really, really physical. You've got a lot of players who are familiar with each other as well. The likes of Craig Borthwick still playing at Biggar. They've got Andy Jardine there as well, who played for Melrose. So in his time, he's been playing up against Ayr, which was a historic rivalry. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting game.
Interesting as well, Grant Anderson saying that even though they scored 60 plus points, he's going to be dropping a few people because he wasn't happy.
I don't think it matters what type of game you play in. If you're still winning by that amount of points, they must have left points out there on the pitch. So they're not happy with how maybe they've went through their game and not finishing off chances, or maybe inaccuracies at the set piece as well. So it doesn't matter if there's no God-given right to nail down your jersey just because your team scored 60 points. If there's inefficiencies in your team, the coaching staff have to kind of keep that, keep the standards, keep the consistency up. So if there's opportunities to try and reshuffle the pack, then you have to do it. It's because you don't get the next opportunity. These are difficult games in National 1. So if you don't change your team and you've got the instinct and you've got the idea to change your team, if you don't do it and you're defeated, then you're going to come the end of the season and think, if only we'd brought in two different props for that game, if only we'd changed their hooker or changed the fly half. These are the sort of little tweaks that teams can make. They've got the benefit that they had a nice open game to do that. But they're the sort of things that these teams can do.
And it keeps them on the toes, of course, the players.
Yeah, I remember years ago we had a huge win for Peebles, and one of our players actually scored a lot of tries, but it was another game the following week, which was actually a really big game. There was a change in personnel, which caused a lot of friction in the team. The coach at the time, Bruce McNaughton, made it quite clear that it was a completely different game plan that they were playing. So although the player actually scored 4 tries, what they were looking to do was they were looking to bring another player in, because Gala played a brand of rugby that, it was more kicking at the corner. So they wanted somebody who, could field or could, interchange in the back three a little bit more, not maybe the style that they had against Ardrossan when you could bowl through folk. So, sometimes it's just the opposition as well, force changes. So, it's going to be interesting to see what changes they do make compared to last weekend.
Well, Gala will be looking to bounce back against GHA on Saturday at Netherdale. GHA targeting a quick return to the Premiership. Let's hear from Gala Director of Rugby, Ewan Swinton.
Yes, last Saturday was very much a hard day at the office for the whole team. We accept collective responsibility for what was just a thoroughly off day. However, Saturday is a new day and GHA are a new challenge. I'm very confident that the team will respond to the challenge ahead of them. GHA are a big, strong and direct side and will be tough to beat on Saturday. But the team can do it. We proved that against Kelso a couple of weeks ago. There is loads of ability in this side and it will come out on Saturday. So I'm confident of a much improved performance and hopefully a different result to get the season back on track. We are ever confident and ever optimistic that our young, strong squad will improve day by day.
Ewan Swinton, Director of Rugby at Gala. Now, on paper, after GHA's win against Melrose last Saturday and Gala's heavy defeat at Marr side, you'd put this down as a GHA win. But, of course, we've seen Gala reverse a 60-point thumping against Melrose last season and then go on to beat Melrose by chalking up 40 points a few weeks later. So, it can happen, but can they reverse their fortunes on their home patch so quickly?
I just think it would be interesting to see where they're looking their weakest. I've not been able to see Gala yet this season, pre-season or obviously in the league campaign. But you go off what you see on paper there. So obviously, as you say, like the results that we've seen last week it does aim towards a GHA win. They're still a strong squad that have come down for the Premiership. There's a lot of players with Premiership experience, and if anything, the gulf between National 1 and the Premiership has almost got a little bit more. Gala, I think everything points towards, after a heavy defeat against Watsonians, a team who we probably disregarded last week, you're probably thinking, Gala might actually be in for a long season, but we'll be able to gauge a little bit more after this weekend, because we know what GHA will bring. We know that they'll bring exciting backs. They've still got a lot of exciting backs in behind that pack, and they'll be strong up front. They've got a good balance in their squad because they've got that Premiership experience. So depending on what the result is this weekend, we're probably going to be in a better position to analyse Gala going forward.
Glasgow Ackies, they face Dundee. Highland will take on Watsonians on the plastic pitch at Canal Park. So 2 clubs who suffered heavy defeats last week and 2 clubs who enjoyed big wins going head to head.
Yeah, I think that's the nature of National 1. There is obviously, as we mentioned, that little gap between the Premiership and National 1, but there does tend to be that's the early gap starts to show in National 1 as well. So obviously Highland and Watsonians is going to be a really, really interesting game, I think, in terms of Highland getting that victory at Dundee. It's a huge win. It is probably early to see, but that's the intriguing fixture in National 1 for me this weekend, because Watsonians, a huge victory against Gala, and then Highland with a big victory on the road. Highland's a difficult place to go, so it'll be interesting to see what the end result is of that game. And both other teams, Glasgow Ackies against Dundee, almost the other side of it. Dundee were on the end of a heavy defeat, as were Glasgow Ackies, so they need to pick up points at home to make sure that they kind of stave off that fear and anxiety of relegation early on.
Well, in the other match, it's Melrose against GHK at the Green Yards. Very confusing with Glasgow Ackies, GHA and GHK all in the same division. But it's Melrose against GHK at the Green Yards. And here's Melrose head coach this season, Ian Chisholm.
We're really excited to be back at the Green Yards for the first time this season. It's a big day for us. We've got 14s playing in the morning. We've got their under-18s playing in the Scottish Cup in the afternoon. Then us on on at 3 o'clock, so it's a full day of rugby on the green yards, and we're obviously disappointed with our overall performance last week against GHA. After looking at the game, it's not as bad as it felt at the time, but there's still a lot of frustration carried into this week with look at the unforced errors and the penalties. In the end, it allowed GHA the platform to go and attack, and we want a reaction. We've asked for a reaction this week, and I've been really pleased with the quality of training and how much our senior players are taking lead on the field. I think the GHK, they look like they're going to be a different kind of threat to GHA. Historically, they want to play and move the ball in a similar way to us, and they'll be confident after a good win against Biggar. So we need to make sure that we're disciplined technically, tactically, mentally. We need to keep dropping information in around tackle height to each other and reviewing when the ball's dead, just around what we're seeing and what we're after and what we're struggling with. And really, we need to make sure that our effort levels match what the Jazzy deserves. And with holidays, with injuries, we've been struck with a bit of availability. And we're playing Gala A on Friday night, and there will be a couple of boys that double up from the bench, just to make sure that they're getting plenty of game time over the weekend. But from the squad last week, we've lost Craig Fairbairn to injury. Elliot Ruthven, Scott Clark and Harry Makowski are all away on holiday. It does cause issues, especially at the moment when we're struggling for backs. But look, it's a challenge, and it's one that the boys are looking to get into. For players that we've gained, so we've got Hamish Weir coming in after a good performance for the Storm. He'll start at fullback, and Connor Grindle, who we've really liked the look of, he comes into the squad after arriving from Australia last week, where he was. He spent a bit of time with Gordon Highlanders, but he's a player that we've acquired from Toronto Arrows with the partnership that we've got there. And on Saturday we also welcome Oliver McKenzie over from Toronto Arrows. So we're excited to get these guys on the park and excited to see how they can add to our group and hopefully help us kick on.
Ian Chisholm. Well, this one could certainly go either way. Melrose have home comforts and a plastic pitch they're very familiar with. GHK, who beat Biggar last week, they'll be full of confidence. But last season, Melrose put 50 points on GHK, so they'll be out for the win.
Yeah, I just said Highland Watsonians is the most intriguing fixture in National 1. Then I looked at the fixtures again and thought there is Biggar Air and there's also Melrose GHK. You know, GHK with a really good win in the opening weekend against Biggar. It's a really good result, and then it's about backing it up. I don't think the gulf will be as big as what it was last season, but you know, almost the pressure is on Melrose to make sure that they can pick up the results at home. You know, they have had that reshuffled team as well. You know, they've got a lot of players like Stuart Hutchison who stayed, but Scott Clark is now their fly half. Bruce Colvin's still at 9, so they do have that experienced kind of sandwich there with Scott Clark, the new fly half, in the middle. So, you know, it's going to be interesting to see how that game pans out. I think GHK, they might be the surprise package this year. They might be one of the teams that have recruited really well and gelled quickly, and we might just be, you know, disregarding them pretty early on and thinking about Ayr and Biggar and Melrose and what have you. GHK might spring a surprise at the Green Yards.
It'd be interesting to see as well. There are 2 new overseas players coming in, including the one from Canada, Arrows, and they've got a good history of bringing good players across.
Yeah, Mitch Richardson was at one of them last year. I can't remember the name of the other player off the top of my head. And I think one of them went on to represent Canada as well in the last few weeks. So they were phenomenal players, and I think they were part of the reason why Melrose at the start were doing so well. And when they left after the Gala game, they left not long after the Gala game or the Ayr game. That was part of the reason why things started to fall apart for Melrose. So, you know, if they've recruited well, that might be something which will help kind of fluff up Melrose this weekend. So, quick look at the table. Watsonians on top, 5 points. On points difference, they lead from Ayr. Highland, GHA and GHK also on 5 points. Biggar picked up a couple of bonus points. Melrose got a try bonus, and the rest have 0. Now on to National 2, and last weekend Stirling County got off to a flyer, 55-24 at Ruberslaw against Aberdeen Grammar, but full credit to Aberdeen for getting a point out of what was a very miserable day for them. As I say, you know, 40-50 points behind and still fighting to get tries. So, but even still, having said all that, it's sad really to see Aberdeen Grammar, who were in the Premiership a couple of years ago, sliding. I think you've summed it up there. It is sad. I think after that opening weekend, you know, with Aberdeen having home advantage, I think it is quite sad to see them fall. There's obviously a lack of appetite up in Cali or up in Aberdeen area, you know, for rugby at the moment. It's not it's not their fault. It's not the club's fault. I'm sure they're still doing great things up there. But, obviously there's something there. You can't look at that and think there's not a problem, because they, as you say, they were up in the Premiership. They were relegated. They were then in National 1. Another horrific year, relegated. And they've started off National 2 with a bad result. Will the influx of students, that's something that they've always relied on. Will the influx of students help Aberdeen this year? Will the results improve after the students get to the area and they then find the club and then get integrated into the squad? We don't know, but it is sad because really now Highland flying the flag for Cali. There's not a lot of competition up there now, which is sad to see. And it was great as well because, as we mentioned before, the inter-district last year, with Cali winning that, it was almost like, oh, brilliant, they're actually getting a bit of time now to get some time in the spotlight. But difficult opening weekend. Stirling obviously are going to be difficult because they've just been relegated as well. But Aberdeen, that's a really tough start to the season for them.
Of course, Eric Strachan, the new head coach there, a bit of work to do for him. But like anything else, if you've got a new set of players in, a new head coach, new regime, it's going to take a while. But I'm sure it will come good in Aberdeen later in the season. Berwick came back from 2 scores down against Stuart's Melville to take the lead at Scremerston, but Stu Mel battled back to force the draw. Berwick got a try bonus though, while the City side didn't manage that, but honours even at 22 points apiece.
Yeah, that's another. It's strange to see in certainly the top 3 divisions that there was 2 draws in there, but it does show you how tight some of these teams are in terms of their level. Berwick, I think, will be happy with picking up a draw against Stuart's Melville at home, because we've said you don't want to lose at home. You certainly want to win, and you want to win emphatically. You want to try and pick up 5 points, but you don't want to lose. So a draw is not a bad kind of middle ground to be in. But again, it's one of those results. It doesn't tell you too much about the 2 teams, because this weekend, obviously, Stuart's Melville will return to home, and they'll be playing a team that got a victory last weekend, which might just give us a little bit more of an indication. But Berwick they'll be happy to get off their campaign without a defeat.
Kirkcaldy 12, Lasswade 43. Big result for Peter Wright's new team. Yeah,
that was a surprising one. I think Kirkcaldy were a team that I had said, and I was impressed with last year because they started to grow and grow as the campaign went on. They were difficult, especially at Beveridge Park. They're a really difficult team to play. But I thought that might have been tighter, but obviously the retired Peter Wright has obviously still got an influence on his home club, isn't it, Lasswade? So it's nice to still see him in a coaching role. I enjoyed my time when he was at Peebles coaching us. He's a great character, but obviously he's put his stamp on Lasswade. Don't be surprised when we watch Lasswade play. The shape and the style that they play, that's always what Peter Wright brings to a team. He brings that structure. He did it at Peebles, we were successful. He brought that structure, and then we weren't able to grow after that as a team. He went to Selkirk, he brought that structure. They were promoted undefeated, but then weren't able to grow after that. It's not a surprise that Lasswade have picked up a very big win in their opening weekend under Peter Wright, because he will bring that structure to a team, the guidance and the rugby intelligence for players. He does bring that. He brings that to players on the pitch, that they know what role they've got to play. So yeah, it's a big win for Lasswade in the opening weekend.
Former international, of course, and a former international coaching Kirkcaldy, Quinton Sanft.
Yeah, Quinton, who's had a bit of time at Biggar as well. In his time, he, until recently, was still pulling on the boots as well. So two well-known faces around the club game which are still plying their trade. So it's great to see them in National 2 going head to head. But yeah, I think that's 1-0 Peter Wright.
Well, the match that really intrigued me in Division 2 on Saturday was Newton Stewart against Falkirk. Both teams narrowly missed out on promotion on the last day of the season. Not many clubs will go to Bladnoch Park and come away with a win. Falkirk did, though, and did it in style, 31 points to 14, with some late scores towards the end. But that's a great 5 points for Falkirk.
Yeah, and I looked at their squad. It was on social media, and I looked at it and I thought, obviously we covered the final for the inter-district, and I started looking at the names, and the ones that I was impressed with in the final, I thought they're still at Falkirk, so they've got a really, really strong squad, and I think they'll be one of the teams that will be there or thereabouts. And against Newton Stewart, who were a difficult team, especially at home last year, to pick up that win, I think Falkirk have perhaps put down their marker to say that they're going to be considered for promotion this year.
And Falkirk captained by Finn Russell's brother. Now, is that Archie?
Archie, I believe.
Yes.
The scrum half, a good player. Really, it was immense in that inter-district final. He was really, really good. And I think the games that I have seen him in, he's been one of those players that have probably got better and better as he's got older. His brother's the same. He has matured and improved over time, just at a slightly different level. But Archie Russell is one of those players as well that has improved over time, and he's got better and better, and you can see the influence now that he has on Falkirk. He's a really good player, and a player that I think will certainly turn a few heads in National 2 this year.
So the other game, Peebles beating newly promoted Gordonians by 27 points to 17 at the Gites.
Yeah, good result for Peebles. I think the feedback that I've heard was that it was a good win, but there was areas for them to improve. I don't think they were fully happy with their overall performance. So there's certainly stuff for Graham Patterson to do in there. A good occasion. It was a great day at the Gites. Sponsors, it was open to everybody, and I think there was a sizable crowd at the Gites, which is good. So, a good way to start the season. It was nip and tuck for part of the game, and then I think in the last few minutes they pulled away, especially getting that try towards the end. It takes away those points from Gordonians as well, which is something that rugby players love. You don't want to be giving your up if they get a losing bonus point. It's still something which you regret and you don't like to see. You don't want teams to come to your patch and leave with anything. So Peebles will be happy that they were able to get that one over the line and keep Gordonians to leave them with nothing.
Gordonians, of course, last year went through almost unbeaten. I think they lost one or maybe two, but that's about as much as it was. And they're definitely a club back on the up again.
Yeah, definitely. I was speaking to Stephen Ferguson after the game. I went to Peebles, and I was speaking to Stephen Ferguson, who's obviously been honoured with a Scottish cap for obviously the retrospective caps, which should have been announced by the SRU. So it's great to see that accolade. But he was saying exactly the same. He was intrigued by it because it's been a while since he's been down to the rugby and watched it at the Gites because of other commitments. And he said he was intrigued by the game because obviously Gordonians were a team that have been undefeated for a long, long time, not used to being beaten, and these habits are really hard to break, but Peebles did well to break that at the weekend.
So look at the fixtures, and it's Falkirk at home to Aberdeen Grammar, and hard to see anything but a home win there based on the first week of the season.
Yeah, I think so. I think Falkirk have really put down the marker, as I said, and Aberdeen are on a little bit of a downward spiral. I don't see it getting any better for Aberdeen this weekend. I can see Falkirk winning handsomely at home.
Gordonians will face Kirkcaldy, both looking for their first points of the season. And then it's Lasswade at home to Newton Stewart. Lasswade winning that fixture 13-8 last season. So again, two clubs that are pretty evenly matched. And I think the Peter Wright influence is going to be very important in this one.
Yeah, as I say, I was speaking about what Peter Wright does to a team. And I think at that level, that is what you need. At National 2, you're going to have naturally good rugby players. You're going to have quick players, you're going to have skillful players that can kick, and you're going to have the hardy back rows, but it doesn't count for much if you don't have the structure in behind it. And that's where in National 2, if you do get that structure, it really, really does put you on a good footing. So I would, again, for that game, I would be saying a home win.
Well, our featured game tomorrow is between Stuart's Melville and Peebles. There'll be highlights on Borders Rugby TV on Sunday, and it's our commentary game on Rugby Radio from 2:30. Just go to our website at rugbyradio.co.uk. You can click and listen on our homepage. It's as simple as that. And of course, we'll keep you up to date with the latest scores across the country throughout the afternoon. So let's hear from both camps. First, Graham Patterson, head coach of Peebles, and then we go for a wee drive in the car with Stu Mel's main man, Alex Haggart.
Yeah, we had a great win last week against Gordonians at home to start our programme. 5 points is always good. Good start to the league programme, and now we look to move on to our first away game at Stumel. They're going to be a tough proposition, having come down from National 1, and I'm pretty sure they'll be looking to bounce straight back on the back of their opening draw against Berwick away. So we're under no illusions that it's going to be a tough afternoon. Having said that, we've identified a couple of areas that we feel we can improve on, which will hopefully give us the best chance of achieving that success. We're looking at gain line successes, both sides of the ball. So in terms of our attack, we've just given the guys a couple of areas to work on in training this week to improve that in terms of looking at breaching their line. But also what we're looking to do is not get our defensive line dented by them. So looking at our good high intensive line speed and ensuring that the tackle count is very high in terms of tackle completion rate. which was a slight concern last week and allowed Gordonians back into the game, having got ourselves in a good position. So these are areas that the players will be focused on, and I'm sure that we'll see some improvement in that, which on the back of that, aligned to our fundamentals in terms of the scrum, line out and phase play, it will give us the best opportunity to win the game. In terms of personnel changes, we have one change from the starting lineup with Matty Carrier away this weekend. So he's unavailable, so Willie Aitken comes off the bench and starts, and John Napier moves across the front row to start at hooker. All other personnel are the same. The bench is completely refreshed. We have two older members of the squad in terms of Neil Hogarth and indeed our captain Murdo Anderson returning, both having been unavailable last week. And also our third forward substitution is another product of a great youth system in Rory Smith, who'll be looking to get his debut off the bench in this inaugural year in seniors, which is always a good sign for the future. And our final sub is Scott Studdart, who returns to the squad, having had a 3-week layoff due to concussion sustained at the Kelso Border League game. So it's good to welcome these older players and experienced players back into the squad, giving us some quality in there, and also sprinkled with a little bit of youthful enthusiasm and performance from young Rory Smith as well, to show us what he can do at this level.
Mixed emotions after the draw at Berwick. I think if you'd told me after 20 minutes that we were going to draw, I would have been really, really disappointed. But if you'd given me a draw with 10 minutes to play, I would have been pretty happy, and I was pretty happy. I think in the first half, we flew out the blocks. We played some awesome rugby. We were really accurate both sides of the ball, and I thought we did some really, really good things. But it just goes to show that you don't win games within the first 20 minutes. You've got to build scores, you've got to build momentum, you have to build wins, and I think we were trying so hard to get a bonus point and win inside the first 20 minutes. Yes, we had lots of field position and territory, but we maybe didn't actually execute what we wanted to out of those. So that was quite challenging. But in the second half, Berwick played really, really well. I thought they did what they did outstandingly. They suffocated us. We had no ball. They were really accurate. And I think in the balance of things, 22-15 down, particularly after all the adversity that group of players experienced last season with losing and being close in quite a few games, it was quite pleasing for me that they stuck at it and they were resilient, and they came away with a draw in the last sort of 5 minutes of the game, which was really, really good. So mixed emotions, but glad to get some points on the board, and glad to not lose, really. Looking forward to Peebles. They had an awesome win against Gordonians on Saturday last week, who, let's be honest, Gordonians swept all before them in Nat 3. I think they maybe lost one game out of their 20-odd that they played, which was really impressive. We know we're in for a stern test. I think the big thing for us and what we were looking to achieve is we just really want to improve on what we did last week. I think between our goal line and the opposition 22, I think we were really, really good. We were really efficient in what we did. I thought our kicking game was quite strong. We won the kicking battle, I would probably say. But what we did in the opposition 22 maybe wasn't good enough. And a huge amount of that came down to us as coaches. So we've worked really hard on what we do in opposition 22 this week, trying to make sure that we're efficient, trying to make sure that we know our roles and we've got clarity of how we want to approach it. So that's been the big focus, and I think on Saturday, if we can show that and we can get that kind of in play and we can improve on that particular area, that's all we're really looking for. We know Peebles will give us a really stern test. They're experienced in this league. They've been a driving force in it for a really long time, and we've had some great battles with them over the time as well. Two very different teams. I don't really recognise many of the players, but I'm sure that'll be the same for their coaches and their players as well in respect of us. So it'll be an exciting battle. We're just looking to put a really good show in, particularly in that red zone back home at Inverleith.
Master of the multitask there, good indicating as well from Alex Haggart, and I believe he did pass his test when he recorded that as well, despite giving us the latest news from Stu Mel at the same time. So well done to Alex there. Now Dale, last season Stu Mel very, very good at home, not losing by many points in most of their home games, and they'll certainly fancy themselves against Peebles, and I'm looking forward to the forwards battle in particular. But two evenly matched teams, and it should be a good contest, but Peebles will certainly be missing Matty Carrier.
Yeah, it is a sizable gap, but I think the youngsters that they've got coming through, they've got a lot of players that, especially in the Peebles Reds that played Gala a few weeks ago in the Border League, they've had players in there that are getting game time, which is something that Peebles have perhaps struggled with in years. At that level, you sometimes do. There's usually voids. Matty obviously brings a lot of experience, but with the vacancy that he leaves because he's got other duties on, it provides other people opportunity, and that's the opportunity that. If you roll all the years back that Matty had, at Gala and then at Hawick, he had these opportunities, and somebody else just needs to step up and take that. But they've got really experienced players in there, the likes of Willie Aitken in the front row. They've got likes of Ross Brown in the second row as well. Cammy Pye's back playing well. The Harrisons, Jack in particular, they've got a really strong squad, Peebles, and I know that because I played at that club. I've played with them for years, so it's they've still got a team of a lot of experience. Matty Carrier's brought something else different back to the club, but he's still got the same foundations there. He obviously got a brace at the weekend, so he's a sizable guy to try and grab from 5 metres out at a driving maul. But it's the other players then need to try and take up those leadership roles and try and lead Peebles forward. But you've said it. Stu Mel have a historically good home record, not just last season but seasons gone. They've been at the top end of Scottish rugby. They get there because of home form. They're a really, really historic club, so they'll be wanting to put in a performance. Their first home game of the season, Peebles will still be wanting to build off that win against Gordonians. You said that you think they're going to be up there or thereabouts for promotion this season. If they're going to be, they need to win on the road. But Stu Mel will be having a lot to say about that.
Matt Carrier is not playing, but as we heard, Murdo Anderson is coming back, the club captain, and Neil Hogarth back as well. Yeah, I think Hoagie as well. I think he's a remarkable player who started his career in the wing and has made his way to the forwards. I was lucky I retired at the time that I never got that far forward, but he's been playing really well at prop. So he brings a lot of experience and a lot of grunt to that team, a lot of physicality, and Murdo as well. He brings a big engine to Peebles. So it's not to wax lyrical about Peebles and disregard Stuart's Melville, because we know these players pretty well from the border side of things. The Stuart's Melville players, I'm sure, will light up the turf, and we'll be speaking about a lot more of them going forward. Obviously in the second row they had representation in the inter-district as well. So they've got players that are experienced players that will be wanting to put in a performance on their home patch. And Neil Hogarth, even though he's a grandfather, can still sprint, can he? I was really amazed the last time I saw him against Kelso. He's an interesting player. He wears his heart on his sleeve. I've got a lot of time for Hoagie. I think that when I seen him being installed as club captain last season, it was just rewards for what he's given to that club. Every club's got players who stay there for long periods of time, don't go anywhere else, don't look over the fence, don't want to try and better any other team, and Hoagie was that guy. He's been fortunate with injuries. He's suffered a few bad injuries, a fractured eye socket against Hawick YM, and he's had pulls and tears and what have you over the years, but he's always bounced back and he's always come back to provide his best for Peebles. And he's a difficult character. He's relentless. He doesn't give up, and as you say, he can still sprint. He was quick when he was a winger, but he's so solid. As a runner, he's a difficult player to try and bring down, and he still gives everything on the pitch. Well, the other game in Division 2, Stirling County play Berwick, and will be favourites, obviously, with home advantage at Bridge Hall against a team that struggled on the road last season. We caught up with one of the Berwick coaching team, Paul Pringle. But first, the Stirling County head coach, and that's Craig Deacons.
It was a very encouraging start to the season for us on the road up in Aberdeen, picking up the bonus point win. It was great for the coaches and the players to see firsthand the hard work paying off that we've put into our attack and defence structures in pre-season. We knew Aberdeen, they're a really good, physical, gritty team. They're not going to give in, they're going to play for 80 minutes. They've managed to pick up the try bonus point, which was a bit of a disappointing end to the game for us. These small margins, allowing teams back into the game, we're going to have to learn that quite quickly, that, when we're on top of teams, we're going to have to be able to put them away. However, it was a really good performance from some of the guys, especially individually, some really good, strong individual performances. We also had 5 debuts for the first 15 on Saturday, so it was a really good transition for them. But some of the standouts for us on Saturday was like Ben Yarrow and George Radcliffe and Andy Rutherford all picking up tries, really good, strong tries, good performances. But we ended up picking our man of the match was our 9 Ross Drummond. Game management, his passing, his kicking from hand, just kept the pressure on Aberdeen all the time. Moving on to this weekend, we're playing Berwick at Bridge Hall. We expect Berwick to be turning up really confident after a good draw last weekend against Stuart Melville at home. We expect them to be a well-drilled, big physical team. We're looking forward to the challenges that they're going to be bringing to us at Stirling County. However, we're saying to our players, take confidence from last week's performance at Aberdeen, but we don't want to become complacent. We want to build on that, and actually there's plenty of work-ons to be taken forward to this weekend. But we now know what we can do in the pitch. My challenge to my players is, we need to go out and deliver that again this weekend.
This week we're off to Stirling in our first away game of the season. This comes on the back of what was a pretty strong but slightly frustrating performance last week, where we drew 22-all with Stuart's Melville. It was 3 points though, which is a good start, but for us, we definitely saw it as an opportunity missed. We're still getting to grips with the new tackle height laws and just the enforcement of them. We probably were a little bit frustrated last week, when these sanctions were applied. And just getting, comfortable with it ourselves, what we need to do to keep ourselves on the right side of referees. So that's stuff we've worked on this week in training. Moving on to this weekend. Unfortunately, we have a high volume of guys that are actually unavailable due to either being across to see the Rugby World Cup or family events. So we actually have 15 unavailable players this week. However, the lads have trained well. It does create opportunities for the new lads coming in, so we'll look to see, how they grasp it. We had guys like Jordan Jackson came off the bench for us last week and, really kind of showed what he's about. So he'll be starting on Saturday, so it'll be great to see him coming in. Other guys like Duncan Horsburgh as well, these are really good opportunities. So let's hope these guys seize it with both hands. We're under no illusions it'll be a tricky tie, but it's a strong pack and a good set of backs. We're hoping that we can get the right outcome on the road.
Paul Pringle and Craig Deacons looking forward to their game in National 2. It's going to be tough for Berwick. Stirling very confident after their big win at Rubislaw, and you just hope that Berwick will start getting some away matches where they can be competitive.
Yeah, it's a long trek though. That's a long travel for an away game for Berwick, and it's just, I think Stirling County though, I know you say about Berwick they're wanting to try and get some form away from home. I think Stirling County will be wanting to really back up their big win last weekend and build that home form themselves, because they'll be wanting to bounce straight back up. They won't want to be languishing in National 2. And I don't mean any disrespect to their teams that are in there, but they're a team that have a semi-professional team. And to build a successful team at that level, you need the foundations underneath. So, it's the same as all these clubs that they want to have successful youth sections because they want their team to be successful. It's a slightly different demographic for Stirling County. So, I think, you've got to look at that and think that on what we've seen last weekend, Stirling County will probably start that favourites, but it starts at 0-0 and it'll be interesting to see how that game progresses.
And so we come to National 3, and let's run over the results from last weekend for you. Allen Glens 10, Hillhead Jordan Hill 7, Cartha Queen's Park 12, Preston Lodge 54, Dumfries 26, Boroughmuir 28, Hawick 36, Hamilton 31, and West of Scotland 26, Orkney 32. All pretty close with the exception of Preston Lodge's big win at Cartha.
Yeah, PL were a team that have got relegated last year after that great game against Berwick to end the season. I think, but you look there, West of Scotland, a team that has had a lot of success, a lot of successful players as well, going to big and better things in Scottish rugby. They're beaten by Orkney, who have to travel, from the Highlands to go into the mainland, and they've put in a good performance, and I bet that was a good either ferry or flight back. Certainly be a good trip back to start the season for Orkney.
And it certainly shows we're in for a very competitive Division 3. Yeah,
I think that's going to be competitive as well, and the difficulty is there is slight gulfs between the divisions. So there's a gulf between Prem and 1 and then 1 and 2, and you can almost see there with PL going down the gulf between 2 and 3. So it's going to be hard, but they've put down their marker and said we want to be one of the teams to be beaten. So it's going to be another interesting campaign. There's another really tight competitive league, but you've got to win your games ahead of you, and we don't know what's going to come ahead of us. We don't know if their star players are going to get injured. We don't know if there's going to be horrific weather, which is maybe going to suit a team better. PL, probably when it comes to winter, will enjoy like the clatchy weather and the heavier pitches, but that's still to come. So we're in the opening stages of the season, and over the next few weeks we'll see it start to unfold.
We've mentioned Aberdeen Grammar, we've mentioned West of Scotland, two clubs from the past who have done particularly well. Let's throw in Boroughmuir there, who are in Division 3. Good to see them get a win there on the road at Dumfries, 28-26, but this is a team that really wants to start going back up.
Yeah, I think they need to. I don't know. I don't know too much about how the club itself is running, but I know players likes of Murray Johnson going back there as well and playing for Boroughmuir in recent years, and Jack Hamilton, from Selkirk going back and he's now playing for Boroughmuir. It's going to be a big ask. It's another competitive league. They obviously got relegated last year as well, but the difficulty is that all the clubs that have got the semi-professional teams, they've all got different makeups of how their clubs run. Boroughmuir don't benefit from having a private school or things like that. They have a state school, a successful state school as well, but after that it is a standalone club, and it's so competitive in Edinburgh, so it's going to be tough. Once you start falling, it's hard to try and get the quality of player and the quality of volunteering as well, and coaching staff to try and bring your club back up the leagues. But you get a win in the opening weekend and it's a good start.
And they could well get a win at Meggetland against Cartha Queen's Park, who of course on the receiving end of a bit of a thrashing from Preston Lodge. So again, if you get your first two games and you've got 2 W's in the column, then that's certainly going to do you the confidence that the world are good.
Yeah, and I think that's why, in all sports you sometimes see different teams win a cup than you do win a league, because if you get off to a good start, the momentum starts to really, hit an overdrive. And sometimes, especially at that level, if you're sitting top of the league after 6 or 7 games and you've absolutely hammered the teams in front of you, if you're the visiting team and you've got a little niggle, sometimes those niggles become a little bit bigger in your head, and your squad isn't as strong, and that plays into other teams as well. That plays into the mindset and the kind of marathon that a league campaign is. So you have to build that momentum in early. Sometimes you can afford to lose or get bad results in your first couple of games, but you need to get back on the horse pretty quickly to build that momentum and make a challenge towards the end, because it's all about pressure. It's all about putting pressure on teams, individuals, coaching staff, preparation when it comes to the last few games of the season.
So Boroughmuir against Cartha Queen's Park, Hamilton take on Allen Glens, Hillhead Jordan Hill are at home to Dumfries, Orkney welcome Howe of Fife, and Preston Lodge taking on West of Scotland at Pennypip.
Yeah, a lot of interesting games in there. I think it's going to be another attritional and competitive weekend. It's I think the teams that you look at there, like PL, have obviously had a good performance in the opening weekend. You want Boroughmuir to build on their campaign, so I think we mentioned them there in the build up from last weekend's games, and we'll see how the teams go. I think Orkney, it'll be interesting to see how they back up their result as well, because that's an interesting clash as well.
Preston Lodge on top of the table then, Orkney next, followed by Howe of Fife and Boroughmuir, who all have 5 points. No bonus point, but a win for Allen Glens, who come next on 4. Dumfries, Hamilton, West of Scotland all picked up a couple of bonus points at the weekend. Hillhead Jordan Hill have 1 and Cartha on 0. Well, finally on to National 4, and we really, this is a complete unknown quantity, of course, of what's going to happen this season. So last Saturday was intriguing. A great start in National Rugby for newcomers Garnock, who beat Ross High 62-10. A high-scoring match with Greenock Wanderers losing at home to White Craigs 34-32 for that one. Also close between Murrayfield Wanderers and Perthshire. That one ended 38-35 to Wanderers. North Berwick comfortably put Dunfermline to the sword, 40 points to 6. And in another close game, it was Stuart Tree who got the better of Strathmore, winning by a single point by 30 points to 29. So, as I say, another competitive league, and Garnock certainly marking their debut in National Rugby with a great win.
Yeah, and I think that's probably, comes back to what I say earlier on in terms of it's really difficult to gauge where these clubs are, because sometimes there's a little bit of, influx of influence, whether that be player coming into the club or whether it be coaching staff, or you've just you've unearthed a gem. Sometimes these clubs can ride on the crest of a wave at the start of a season and come up. So definitely a good start for them, and it's going to be another league campaign which is going to be competitive. I think the beauty of it now is you can see the 10-team leagues really starting to make it a little bit more interesting, in terms of there's not anybody at the moment in those leagues that you could really earmark as being whipping boys in any of the leagues so far. because, you know, obviously there was a lot of relegation last year, and even you look back at it in National 1 where Gala had a really heavy defeat, you're not really going to consider them as whipping boys of the league yet, because it's hard to gauge into it. But, you know, you go into National 4, it's exactly the same, you know, really interesting league ahead.
So Dunfermline are at home to Murrayfield on Saturday. Perthshire host Stuart Trade, Ross High and North Berwick will lock horns. Strathmore await Greenock Wanderers to their ground, while Whitecraigs will be trying to stop Garnock from running up another big score. So that's us up to date on the Scottish Club Rugby Podcast. Plenty of interesting games on this weekend. A reminder that Rugby Radio on Saturday will come to you live from Inverleith from 2:30. Our featured match is in Division 2 between Stumel and Peebles. There'll be television highlights of that game, and also Kelso versus Heriots in the Premiership on Borders Rugby TV over the weekend. And don't forget to check out our new website at rugbyradio.co.uk for all the information that you need on the 50 clubs playing National Club Rugby in Scotland this season. And if you have the urge to get in touch for whatever reason, drop us a line, podcast@bordersrugby.net. But for now, from Dale Clancy and me, bye for now.